So hello guys, my name is Ayush and with me we have our co-host Shashank. So today we'll be interviewing one of our most amazing and most Machao alumni, Karan Desai. So let me give his brief introduction to God. So he is a first year CS PhD student at the University of Michigan, advised by Justin Johnson. He is also a visiting scholar at the Georgia Institute of Technology before joining UMich. So he is also an IIT Roorkee alumni and was an active member of mobile development group IIT Roorkee, and he also started a reading group named Vision and Language Group. He was selected twice in GSOC with TARDIS in 2016 and OpenCV in 2017. Parallel to his GSOC, he also interned at Goldman Sachs in 2017. Yeah. His interests lie broadly in the areas of deep learning with the application of computer vision and natural language processing, and that's all his achievements and his areas of interest. So we are really delighted to have you, Karan. So now
Yeah,
Shashank,
thank you. Thanks for having me.
yeah. So now Shashank will be proceeding with the questions.
Okay, so Karan, I remember seeing your repo where you made a neural network library from scratch in 2015. So
Yeah,
that shows that you started deep learning pretty early compared to all of us who are in campus right now. So,
yeah.
so I want to ask you the most basic thing, which is how did you start? So for me personally, it was an image classification project that I had to do, and when I was searching how to do that, I came to find out that CNN was a thing. So
Hmm.
that led to studying more about CNN, and that led to finally where I am right now. So how did you
Right.
start?
Yeah. So first things first. Yeah, I do remember the time back in 2015. Yeah, I started pretty early. As say, for example, when I made that repo, uh, for example, ResNets. ResNets were not out. They've got published like six months after. Adam Optimizer was just like very fresh and new in the community. It just came out on archive. There was no TensorFlow, there was no PyTorch. TensorFlow came like 4 months after. PyTorch came like 8 months after I did my first project. So there was mainly Theano and Cafe. Coming back to the question on how did I start, for me it was a small online book. It is a book written by Michael Nielsen, and it is publicly
Mm-hmm.
available on neural networks and deeplearning.com.
.com.
So
Yes.
yeah, so it was pretty random. I had just started my second year, and I remember seeing a Facebook post on a freshers forum on Facebook. Like, so it was a freshers forum for a batch of 2018, and like someone from batch of 2016, his name is Abhishek Kandoi, CS batch of 2016. He had like posted a very long message on like some ideas about weekend projects for people to just like explore. So there were a lot of bullet points like trying to make a game on Unity, or solving some X programs, like some X problems on Spodge. I think Spodge is retired now, but yeah. So one of them was training a small neural network which can classify a single handwritten digit, and I had no idea about like say anything and how neural networks work or what they do, but the idea of automatically recognizing a handwritten digit, it sounded very cool to me, like to a kid who was like 5 years ago from now. So yeah, I pinged him, and he gave me a link to this book, and he said that you can start from here. Now that book was like very, I would say, very small and concise. It was 6 chapters, and I basically like read through it in a week, almost like binging through it. It was a very easy read. Like the things were explained very clearly and intuitively, and I really liked the book. I still go back to it quite a lot. And in that book, in the first chapter, they had they walked through implementing a neural network from scratch using Python and NumPy. So I did not know Python, not even the syntax back then. I had mostly worked with Java and C++. So through the first chapter of that book, I picked up on like basic Python syntax, and it was like my first ever piece of code written in Python and my first ever neural network. So yeah, I implemented it from scratch. It was just a multi-rail perceptron, not even CNNs, no fancy CNNs. And I used my laptop, which was an HP Pentium core processor laptop. It was like pretty big,
Yeah.
and it had like just two cores of two CPU cores.
Mhm.
So to train it on MNIST, which typically takes minutes these days on GPUs, I trained it overnight, and I was
Okay.
eager to watch the results the next morning. And then I visualized the images and I checked the predictions, and it was like working pretty well. So that was like very motivating, and it looked really cool. Like it gave me this like very short like very quick reward and motivation to like go further. So I restructured the implementation slightly differently from the book, and I tried to make it like simpler and more accessible because
Mhm.
yeah, and like it was slightly different. And I just uploaded a GitHub repo and posted it on Hacker News. And I did not totally expect it, but I got some like 600 plus stars in a
Yes.
week, and it was trending for a week on GitHub. And I think it was the first time for me. So yeah, now I guess if I did it now, no one would even look at it. But
Mhm.
there are two things. 2015, it was like way early, 5 years from now, and also like I was in second year. I was just starting out, so all this like sounded very cool and very fascinating to me. And this short reward of like trending on GitHub and all that, I think it motivated me for to like do more of it and explore more. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
how it all
I
started.
mean, like, yes, as you are saying, like 2014, 2015 was when it started exploding. Like, AlexNet came
Yeah,
out in 2012, but in
yeah,
2014 is when in universities the field started to explode, and people were
yeah,
starting to learn about it. And
yeah,
you were there when it started exploding. So, like, you were in a very
yeah,
good spot in terms of how much you can learn. Although
yeah,
it was difficult for you compared to now because you didn't have that many libraries at that time, so you had to do everything by yourself.
yeah. I mean, it works both ways. For example, I had a Twitter account, not the same one which I use right now, but and so yeah, I followed a bunch of people, and it was still manageable to like keep track of like a lot of good work. But now it's like tens and fifties and hundreds of papers coming out every
Exactly.
day. So it's blowing up, and I don't know where it will saturate, but it will take a while. So yeah, that was then, and this is now.
Yeah.
But yeah, after that, I just did the CS 231N course from Stanford and CS 284N, like computer vision and NLP courses. So I got to know about the Coursera course like after I read this book. But yeah,
Okay.
I also looked through it a bit, and yeah, I think it came in full circle for me. I am now working with one of the people who taught CS231N.
Yes, just
So
down from.
it's quite funny. It's quite funny how things changed a lot in like 5 years. But
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah. And as you said, that ebook by Michael Nielsen is really good. Like we still recommend it to people who just want to start, particularly for deep learning. So, like if you want an intro from the basics of deep learning and don't want to go
yeah,
into like traditional machine learning algorithms, I think like that book is really good for beginners.
yeah, and it does not like be like it does not have this hype train or anything going on. It's a very nicely written and very lucid book, and it has like this back propagation math worked out in its chapter 2, and some intuitions built of like how like the preferences of using mean square error laws versus cross entropy and all that. So it's a really good book. Like 6 chapters are very dense, and I think it gives a good start. Yeah,
Yeah,
I agree.
chapter 4 is where they prove the universal approximation theorem for neural
Yeah,
networks. So yeah,
yeah,
that I
yeah, yeah,
don't personally see in every blog when you introduce deep learning, but so that
yeah,
was good to see.
exactly. Yeah. So yeah,
Okay,
that was my
so
first project.
5 years, let's say 4 years from then, you were in your final year. You went for research. The most
Hmm.
concerning question for our Janta would be like, why research versus jobs?
I see.
So
So why research versus jobs? Um, For me, it was like, so I decided it over a course of one summer, like summer 2017, when I was
Okay.
doing my internship at Georgia Tech, and I had a parallel GSOC with OpenCV. So like I was working on two things to get like in parallel. I was at Goldman Sachs during the day, and after I would come back at home, I would work on GSOC at night. So there were two things going on, and it was sort of easy for me to identify where my interests were leaning a bit. Like there was a very stark contrast between both, like the type of work in both of them, and I naturally preferred the type of work I did in OpenCV. I was working in one of their like contrib projects, or like a dependency library called TinyDNN, which was
Okay.
like a head only C++ library, and I really enjoyed working on it more than JS. And on the same like at the same time, I think I felt like I was not a good fit in JS. Like I liked the project, but I could not see myself working on it for more than 6 months. uh,
Okay.
it depends from person to person, but it just, yeah, I just felt it that way. So yeah, I decided that I should continue doing something towards CV, maybe take a job, CV oriented job, or maybe go for masters or something. And like after I came into my fourth year, I just like randomly looked into these computer vision profiles, and most of them like in industry require a PhD, and faculty
Yeah.
positions like regardless of CV, like for any faculty positions, you need a PhD. So I think for me, it was almost a no-brainer to like go for a PhD. The only thing to check was to like just to make sure of what I would be signing up for. Yeah.
Okay. So what do you want to be your end goal? Like, do you want to be a professor, or do you want to first do a PhD and then get a job in CV, as you mentioned that
So
PhD is
yeah,
required?
yeah. So right now, I do lean towards an industrial job, mainly because of like this whole experience I had in undergrad. I genuinely prefer, like I like software engineering and generally writing good code, scalable code, and all that. And I would prefer doing all the heavy lifting. And I see myself undertaking these, I would say, first author projects where like the person who does all this heavy lifting. And that's why I think like going into industry would be a better fit for me. But then on the other hand, I also like the mission of academia. I would say like the whole feeling of the whole practice of say mentoring someone and seeing them grow, that is also very rewarding and satisfying. So I think so my plan for now is to like try teaching a few lectures later in my PhD, and also taking up a few undergrad and master students to work on a project with me, uh, and see how good of a mentor I am, what are my weaknesses in mentoring, and if I like it as good as say industry, and then go from there. So I have still left it open, but I am slightly leaning towards an industrial job.
Okay. So it has been 5 years. So going for research then versus going for research now, like is now I think is obviously much harder. You require at
Yeah, yeah,
least two or three papers just to apply for a PhD at UC Berkeley, and like
yeah,
I read some tweet by a professor, and he said that when I was applying for a PhD, having two or three papers ensured your tenure job. So
yeah,
like how
yeah.
do you like how do you how confident were you when you were applying for these programs, and whether you will make the cut or not? Like, were you
Okay.
confident about yourself like applying in this field?
Yeah, I do agree that like now is obviously harder. I have been told this a lot of times from different people. Let's say, for example, my advisors at Georgia Tech said like they graduated in 2009 and 10, and they said that they might not get in with the credentials they applied back then. My current advisor says that, who got in I think 2013, if I recall correctly, that he with the same credentials he might not make the cut right now if he applied in 2019. And I think I would also say the same thing. I applied in the 2019 cycle with the same credentials. If I applied to like in the 2020 cycle, I think I might not also made the cut. So yeah, the competition is growing, like it's like ridiculously competitive, and it's like growing every passing year. So it might saturate at some point of time, but I don't see it happening for like say next 5 years. So yeah, initially in 2018, yeah, in 2018, I was in my final year, right? 2017-2018 academic year. So I would say first thing, I was naive. I did not have enough idea about how things are in the community, and I was just sure of doing a PhD, but I did not hedge my opportunities properly, and I did not identify them properly. So yeah, my first job was to check what all paths I could take to, like say, if I set a goal of a PhD, what paths I could take to like even get a PhD admit. So yeah, first thing, I had kept no backups, so like I skipped out of campus placements. So I had like no other options other than like say just sticking into academia or something. So I searched for possibilities to say do year long like summer internships, 6 months internships, year long internships, or like I also applied for masters, and yeah, I generally applied widely, and I assumed the worst, that I would not get into anything, and that then I thought that maybe if nothing works out as planned, I might as well take a break and go back home after graduating and figure out something from there.
Okay.
So, well, the world is not made of counterfactuals. So I don't know if I would not have gotten this offer at Georgia Tech, what I would have done. But yeah, it is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, like that was a risky. I mean, you that having no backup might have been a little risky for you, but as you
Yeah,
said
in
that
hindsight,
you,
I think it was risky.
yeah, but I think what gave you the edge over the others was your Georgia Tech RA-ship that finally
Yeah.
made you land into a UMich as a PhD student. So, like, how did you apply for it? You said that you were doing a GSOC project with them. Pete
Um,
said Georgia Tech, so
Yeah, so not so this is not exactly true. Like it often comes up as a confusion because the organization in Georgia Tech is Cloud CV, and my project, like my GSOC project, was Open CV, and sometimes people tend to confuse these orgs. But no, it wasn't that. I knew for a fact that. So first things, I think during my undergrad I would be rarely benefited by say outcomes of post black box decisions. For example, say if there I would never win a hackathon which would be like say 12 hours long or something, because yeah, I think I generally don't play well in these short bursts of time where there might be some randomness or something. But I have been lucky in like getting an opportunity which involves like a slightly longer game. For example, GSOC, you have to make like a couple of PRs, and then there is this proposal, and it's like you get into the community, get to know other people for a period of 2 or 3 months, and then you start getting a signal whether you get in or not. And even if you don't, you would exactly know the reason why you don't. Like it's not too random. So I think I got lucky with this, as in I got to know about my advisor at Georgia Tech, that he generally takes on interns, and that's why I made him. And it was also similar to, I thought it was almost similar to what these GSOC type exercises are. I was given an implementation task. I was given a paper reading task, and then there was an interview. So I liked the whole process throughout, and I got a lot of feedback on the way. So I, yeah, I had a feeling that I might get in. Like I had a positive feeling, but even if I didn't, I would have drawn some signal out of it. Yeah. So certainly, I would say I applied for the internship at Georgia Tech because I knew that through when they like my advisors there, they often take on students for long internships. Yeah, so after I landed with my internship at Georgia Tech, so I started in June 2018 up until June 2019. It was a year-long internship, and like I had no courses, so it was a good opportunity in the sense that I had just one thing to work on. That would be my project, and this is exactly what I wanted. I always thought that it would be better to get some research experience before starting on directly into a PhD through an internship or through like say like going into masters first and getting an experience from doing some project like during the masters. So I think my experience at Georgia Tech was certainly a game changer, and it completely changed my trajectory. And I think I would not have gotten into PhD without doing this internship at Georgia Tech. And certainly, I think doing like having a research experience before starting a PhD also gave some sort of a head start, because during my 4 years of undergrad, I mainly got multiple chances to improve my software engineering skills, but not so much on research. So yeah, it was certainly important, and I am like generally very grateful to my advisors that I learned a lot. Got access to a lot of people in the community, and towards the end of the internship, I got to present my work in ICML and then later in ICCV, and I also like went to CVPR. So they all like supported my trips to these conferences, and they always encouraged me on the way. So yeah, it changed a lot for me. Yeah.
Yeah. So finally, all your hard work has paid off, and you're currently doing your PhD under Justin Johnson. So I want you to tell us about your experience as a first year PhD student under a new prof, because I think you are his first batch. You are part of his first batch.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how is it different from a veteran prof, and like is it good for you, or like which way you would have preferred going? Things like that.
Yeah. So before I answer that, I would say that I had talked with Justin sometime around in October 2018. So I applied
Okay.
in the fall 2019 cycle, which had like most of the deadlines were in December 2018. So I talked with Justin like 2 months before the application deadline, and like I just mailed him that I am applying. I'm working with Dhruv Devi at Georgia Tech. I'm working on some XYZ projects, and I feel like there is a match. I feel like there is a match in interests and something like that. So he expressed interest, and then we had a chat for an hour. And through the talk, I think like I felt like we had a good match in terms of research interests and certain things we cared about for like say which qualify as good research. So and yeah, so because of that, mainly, I mean, I did not have a choice back then. But after I got an admit, I was not like too uncertain of how my experience would be. Because I had talked to him before. But yeah, it is great so far. We but and I think so it's like a startup. So during our first chat, Justin said that consider it as like say a startup where I would be say a CEO or CTO and you are like a first hire. Things will be ad hoc. Everything is under experimentation. We'll keep on changing like the format of group meetings or like everything, like work ethic and everything. We'll figure it out. So I thought it would be fun, and I went straight ahead with it. And yeah, it's great so far. Justin is very enthusiastic, and I think he's at the same time very sympathetic and understanding, because he has been graduated from PhD recently, and he has gone through everything very recently, which I am and will be going through. So if things don't work out, he's generally patient, and so and so. Yeah.
Okay, so you have also had relatively veteran professors as your advisors as well while you were in Georgia Tech. So,
Mm-hmm.
what's the difference between the two, and which do you prefer personally?
Uh, so for the second thing, I had a choice in a way that I got into a PhD program at UMich, and I got into an MS program which was most certainly funded at Georgia Tech.
Okay.
So my advisors at Georgia Tech were not planning to take on more students. They had a lot of students, and they were very clear about it. Uh, but they supported me throughout the application process, and it was very clear that I would definitely it would make the most sense for me to choose a PhD offer. So in a way, I did not have a choice, but I would say that like both of them have their own pros and cons. I cannot identify any cons as such, but for example, I can only talk about pros, and you can figure out what's the contrast. So, say for example, last year I stepped into a lab which had like some 20 students, and I had a lot of peers to talk with, and but on the other side, because I did not have any courses, my social life outside the lab was very limited. Partly because I did not go to classes and I had no reason to interact with others in the college. And even in official terms, I did not have access to certain things in Georgia Tech which students would have. I was not
Okay.
officially. So there's that. In that scenario, it was more about assimilating the culture of the group into myself and learning, like being a part of it, and like adopting the group as a part of myself. And here it's like I am in the first batch, so it's also implicitly my responsibility partly to like build up and carry on the culture for like incoming students in the subsequent years. So yeah, one is like a company, another is like a startup, I would say, and both are fun in their own ways. And now I am stuck with it. Here I'm stuck with this. These are the cards I've been dealt with. So yeah,
So,
that's it.
are you allowed to do PhD internships during your PhD uh, while you are at
Yeah,
UMich?
yeah. So in for international students in US, there is something called CPT, Curriculum Practice Training, which is basically an allowance of 12 months to do internships, like to be employed outside of the university during our PhD.
Okay.
So I'll be allowed to work outside of my universities within US for 12 months. If I go to say Canada or Europe or India or any other place outside US to do a PhD, that won't be counted, and like that won't take up my CPT. So
Okay.
if I intern more, I can certainly intern more, but I need to secure an internship outside US in case I exhaust my CPT.
Okay.
So yeah, I am generally allowed to do it, but uh, it's a requirement. It's a requirement to stay back in Ann Arbor after my first year. So this summer I am staying here. That's a part of the program, and it was a part of the offer letter. So after
Okay.
that, I could intern in summer, and I have still kept it like open to like further decision. But for now,
Okay.
I am here this summer.
Okay. So nowadays we have seen, as we discussed before, a lot of growth in DL. So
Hmm.
so many people are like in IITR. I personally think that I think one out of every three people has at least the basic knowledge about how to implement some models related to
Hmm.
image classification. And in a
That's
kind of
great.
way, that's a good thing because now they have the power to employ those technologies whenever they need. They don't need to be expert on that, but
Hmm.
what type of DL you prefer, a theory or practice or project based? Do you think that once you do a good project, you can fill the gap in theory just after doing that project, or do you think that theory is a must before going into a proper project?
I see. I think having some basic theoretical knowledge is necessary, like say linear algebra and probability and statistics and all such. So I generally recommend reading the deep learning book, like the deeplearningbook.org. it's available on that website. It's a book
Mhm.
by Joshua Bengio, Aaron Corwell, uh, and
Ian
Ian
Goodfellow.
Goodfellow. Yeah,
Yeah.
Ian Goodfellow. So yeah, I generally recommend that book, and I think it's sufficient to just start out. But I would say that there is no binary answer to it afterwards. But I must
Okay.
say that a good chunk of at least computer vision research these days is often empirical. So
Okay.
having a good theoretical knowledge is necessary, but after that, like to start on, it is necessary to pick up some meta skills, as to say how to like first of all how to execute a research idea, how to prioritize on experiments, how to properly present your ideas in form of paper writing and all that skill. So all those skills are necessary, and for starting out, it's fine to not go too deep in the theory and have some basic sufficient knowledge and move on to the first project, and and gain some confidence that first of all you like it, and second that you can do it, and later you
Okay.
can like juggle between both.
Okay. So, while you were in IITR, what
Mm.
kind of deal the people in your circle, the people you surrounded yourself with, used to do? Like, was it that popular to do theory, or like everybody took their own approaches?
Uh, I need to remember properly, but I can mostly talk about my final year. That's when I started
Okay, that's
identifying
fine.
people who were sharing like common interests with me. So we started this reading group, which is now like we called it paper reading group.
Paper
We did not
reading
come
reviews.
up with we did not come
Mm.
up with any fancy titles, but now it's called Vision and Language Group.
Language.
Uh, yeah, but we started out with a goal to just like say brush up our concepts, because there were certain people in my batch in like fourth year who were planning to apply for say startups focused on computer vision or internships like me, and it would be nice to like just brush up on some basic concepts.
Mm.
So we were gathering once or twice a week to discuss chapters of deep learning book, and then at other times we would also discuss these very seminal papers in computer vision. For example, all these first of all these network architectures, AlexNet, VGG, and ResNets, and then these detection architectures and so on. So we had a mix of both. I, I don't like exactly recall what people would be doing, like what they would be doing as a side project or what they would be doing for their own practice. But generally, I would say people were mostly busy with campus placements, so there
Okay.
wasn't going on in the first, like the fall semester, at least autumn semester. But this is what I majorly recall, like the paper reading group,
Okay.
as I called it back then.
Yeah. Okay. So, now you're doing so many research projects. You have been a part of two or three research projects, I think, and this and you have been through it, like been through complete research projects. So, how much time or your sanity or intellect do you think one could give into a research project? Do you think there is a point where where you have said sometimes like this is it, yeah, I'm done with this, like I can't go further experimenting, I can't try any more things,
Hmm.
just yeah, have you ever been to a point where you just said that okay, this part is done in this project, like I can do better?
Yeah. So I I was mainly involved with like two major projects which turned out to be like published papers by now in Georgia Tech, and third one here which is still under review. So I can mainly talk about specific like every experience specific to a project, and it will all come together. So my first project, I think I joined, like it was not solely my idea. It was one of the thing it was idea it was solely an idea of one of the research scientists in Georgia Tech, and I was just starting out and I did not know how to like come up with ideas. So for me, it was more important to first like just get through the habit of like just get through this exercise of undertaking a research project, like just to prioritize experiments and focus on the low level picture for a while. So in the first project, it was like pretty smooth. I did not have to worry too much about the bigger picture or something,
Mm.
and it wasn't too experimental. So through that, I started building up like this confidence on say that I could like manage all my experiments, and then I could also work on writing a bit from the side. I could describe things like experiment section, and I could write drafts of intro and so on. So quitting was not a problem in the first project, but later, for example, this project, there were certain times, but it's always like that. That's why you need an advisor to let you know that you are say stuck in a local minima, and like for them to like let you know that you are stuck somewhere and you need to either move on or you need to like try something else to make it work. So if well I can say it this way, it varies how much time or sanity you need, but certainly whenever you are experimenting or whenever you are like trying out things to come up with some concrete idea, uh, it is often the case that most people would generally have a lot of faith on their idea. For example, if I think about something, I would be like, aha, this should work, right? And this would be game changing, and it would change how people view at certain things in CV, and they should solve it this way. But it may certainly not work. It may not always work, and I would still have a lot of faith in it. So I think the way out of it is to like get your idea validated by talking with a bunch of peers you have, and just to bounce the idea off them and get their feedback to see if it makes sense, to see if they find it like convincing enough that they should care about it, and then refine it, and also like talk to the advisor on all this to just figure out when to like move on or when to like focus more, and then the rest of it just builds up by experience.
Okay,
I think
so
5 years should be like good enough to like at least improve it like say 20% or something. But
mm,
yeah.
okay, so you have been a part of research groups, so you have seen other people do research as well. So can you
Mhm.
tell your experience of how discouraging have you seen people get with the research? As you said that once you think of an idea, all of your faith lies on that idea, and
Mhm.
like I think 60-80% of time that would fail unless there is a change
Yeah.
of perspective. So,
Yeah.
how discouraging have you seen people get, and what keeps you going? You are just in your first year, so I can't talk about how discouraging you have been till now because you're just starting PhD. But
Mhm.
how do you think keeps people going, or you personally going when you hit a low point?
I see. So yeah, I think I have seen people go through these. Some people go through these phases of say a few months where nothing works, where all of their submissions get rejected and all that. Um, there are a lot, and these talks are very common. At least in this like computer vision community, and I'm sure everywhere in general. And it is I came across this blog. I can send you the link after this call, but it's titled "The Valley of Shit." It is like a valley of depression and shit where things may not work as planned, but it's like just every valley that it is not like endless. It will end somewhere, and you will like you just have to hang in there, and you have to acknowledge that it is a passing phase. And this is what my advisor like I would say. So when I visited UMich for the PhD visit, one of the faculties here, David Foy, he brought this discussion up that during his PhD, it happened with him and a lot of his colleagues when there is definitely, almost definitely, this one period of 8 months to 1 year or 1.5 year where people don't get any publications at all, and sometimes they get really depressed, but eventually they turn out to be good. Going through this exercise, they turn out they come out to be like better researchers than before. They are more grounded, they are more experienced and all. So I would say that hearing all this, I am almost like I am in this belief that it will almost certainly happen to me, and better if it happens earlier, because it's for right now during a PhD. It's okay to fail sometimes. There is a good buffer to fail. If things don't work, it's fine. But as you get more further into your career, say when you are a professor and you have never faced a failure in like last 10 years of your life, and suddenly things don't work out, then it hits harder. And at that time you are also responsible for, say, the students you are mentoring and their career. So yeah, I think it is necessary to go through this exercise. I mean, it's not like that I would deliberately want to go through this very often.
Yeah.
If it does not happen, it's fine. But if it does, I think I am prepared enough to acknowledge it, that okay, I am going through this and I have to hang in there. Yeah. And yeah, I have seen a bunch of colleagues in Georgia Tech, and I continue to see them here. And everyone talks about it openly. And yeah, we keep on just saying that, yeah, hang in there. It will all be okay.
Okay, so a really important discussion that like the researchers have been asked nowadays. So, what do you
Mhm.
think is a good research, good DL research, or any type of good that will you will say quote unquote good research? Uh, Currently, as you have seen that like many people are going after SOTA and papers are publishing like 200, 300, as you said, in a day in tier 3
Yeah,
conferences, tier 2 conferences, even in tier 1 conferences. There are times when some papers are just a change in the loss function, and they sometimes lead to like a big improvement, but and they just write a paper out of it.
yeah,
Especially in big research groups, there I think there's sometimes a trend where the goal is to just get a paper out, and
yeah.
in my personal opinion, that is not a good research. But I want to ask you, what do you think is a good research?
Yeah. First of all, I completely agree with you there. Even I don't consider it, it does not fall in the definition of good research, even for me. Uh, and before I say my answer, I would also give out a disclaimer that I'm still only like 1.5 years into research, and my definition of good research right now may not be the same as it would be, say, 2 or 3 years or even 5 years down the line. It would be more refined later. But for now, I have set up some minimum bar which I would also like to follow, and I'm happy that my advisor also shares the uh, same opinion. So first of all, the minimum bar is that good research should be, first of all, reproducible and not shady. There should not be any hidden details or any tricks hidden away, which would like be the secret sauce to performance. So that is like the minimum bar. Talking in low level picture. Um, Other than that, taking a step back and focusing on the higher level, uh, I would say good research would be something which is like, say, a paper which has one clear takeaway and which does a good job at convincing me why I should care about it. Uh, I think good research, like, say, putting a model A and applying it on a task B and getting SOTA performance, uh, would not fit into this category. And I would say it would not be scalable or even like, say, applied to real world, not now or even if later. So yeah, good research, any good research paper should be able to show a promise that it is like should be able to show a promise that it is feasible and it can scale up to real world problems. and it should be like a general purpose recipe other than being applied on a specific model on a specific task for a one person gain. And all the experiments should generally fall in line with the story the authors are trying to say. And other than that, I would say that an idea should be very simple and intuitive. So if after reading a paper, I have faced this myself in one of my past submissions, where the reviewers gave a weak reject, just saying that this idea is very simple and there is nothing, there is no modeling improvements. But to me, if I were that reviewer, I would rather give it a at least an accept or whatever. I would consider it as a strength of a paper that uh, keeping something so simple and yet making it work, it's definitely a strength. So not just like modeling approach or anything, anything in the paper which seems very obvious on reading, but it is novel, then I would say the authors did a very good job in presenting it. That it seems obvious to a reader who is not familiar with it. So yeah, these are all my definitions of good research for now, and I try to uphold them in the type of work I would do in like say day to day life. It's at least like say this reproducibility in my experiments, uh, and I hope this definition refines and it gets stricter over the upcoming years, and I keep on like following it.
Yeah. On your last point, I want to say that, yeah, as you said, the idea should be simple. If you have too many complex things in your idea, the idea can also be seen as engineering for that particular
Hmm.
metric that you are applying your task to. So
Yeah,
I personally also think that, and my internship advisor, while I was doing my internship, also said to me that if we include this module or whatever that we wanted to, it will improve the performance, but that would be an engineered solution and not a research solution. So,
yeah.
have you also faced some that you wanted to include some part, but you knew that okay, but doing this would be a result in a bad research or a complex idea that you wouldn't want to show to others because it would be less reproducible as there are more modules.
I think reproducibility and heavily engineered solutions are slightly orthogonal. Uh, if it's reproducible, it's fine, but I would be careful in not making it like the central piece of keeping it in the spotlight. If you have a very carefully tailored and engineered approach with some bells and whistles, then it's fine to include it, provided you provide sensible ablations to it and show that
Yes, yes.
your particular contribution works properly. For example, if you for some X task, you propose some training objective like some loss function, right? It has some three components, and that's your main story. That okay, a combination of all the like optimizing all three of these jointly makes sense. Then it's okay to like say include like a larger model or some pre-trained model which has a better performance, right? But then you also need to show it on a bare bones simple model and also present ablations that say in these all of these three components of loss you turn off one or two of them and the performance drops. Like you basically need to show gains of what you
Mhm.
because of what you did solely. On top of that, you can do any sort of modifications and also show that okay, if you add all of these tricks, it further improves performance. But yeah, the main like you get my point, right? The
Yes, yes.
model is necessary.
Mhm. Do you think that a research idea or a research project should be breakthrough, or there should be a, as you said, a novel idea? So should it be different from everything? Should it change the perspective of the people, or as I personally feel that every research is a culmination of the past research that has been done, small improvement. It's not just that you're doing a small improvement and just providing us a better metric. I want to say it's something like that you have different parts and you change the perspective slightly on them. rather than a completely new idea. So, what do you think? Like you have experience in reading research yourself.
Okay, so I would say that while almost certainly while doing a particular like while undertaking a particular research project before it gets published, I don't think most people expect it to be like a breakthrough. Like if it happens, it
Hmm.
happens, and sometimes it is random. Uh, as like people might see a lot of promise, and a particular paper might serve as a springboard to a lot of uh, ideas which branch out later. But I would say that if you keep a mindset of having your like feeling that your idea will be something very groundbreaking and optimized specifically for that before even getting it published, then it is not a good position to be in, I think, because you would set a at times you may set a very unreasonable bar for yourself, and that may lead to you just not generally be interested in anything at all. So it's okay to have like a small like to be have a culmination of past ideas, and I think generally that's how most of the research goes on. Like you identify gaps, like holes and gaps in existing literature, and you try to first care about them at first, that okay, these are significant and filling these gaps is like worthwhile. And also like then you go on about it, and then you try to convince others that they should also care about filling in these gaps. uh, Groundbreaking or breakthrough papers are often rare, and they are mostly almost always not planned to be groundbreaking or not
Hmm.
expected to be groundbreaking. They always come off as a pleasant surprise if they are.
Okay. So it was really fun talking to you today. Uh, at the end note, I want you to do you have ask you that do you have any advice for the IITR Janta that would be listening to this podcast? Like, do you in terms of anything like going through as the situation is right now, like everybody is kind of slightly scared for applying for higher studies because the situations wouldn't be so easy for them now. USA will
Yeah.
mostly restrict the amount of people they accept, maybe even don't accept any people from some countries. So, like, it would be
Hmm.
difficult this year for
Yeah.
applying for research. Would be difficult. So, do you have any advice for the people currently going through that, going in that direction?
Yeah, I would generally say that we are going through tough times, and no one expected it to be this bad, or no one is trained to go through all of this. So we uh, we expect this to go on for the next few months, and it will have a lot of like aftermath even after all this, like the curve flattens. But I would say that there may not be opportunities to like say take shortcuts, but I would say that is fine. You should be like it's okay to wait for a year or two and focus on a longer game, and it's perfectly fine to take a longer path, sometimes even like beneficial. So I would advise just people to not freak out and hang in there for a while, and it will all be okay. Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
So at last, like at the end of our podcast, so we have a little question for you. So, do you want to share your experience being an MDG and also started a paper reading group that is currently known as Vision and Language Group? So, like, can you share your experiences and any last point advice for the people at IIT Roorkee or any other college that is watching our podcast or listening to it?
Yeah, so I would say MDG is, I think, the biggest highlight of being in IIT Roorkee. One of the biggest, if not the biggest, but MDG was a huge chunk of my experience in IITR. I joined back in 2015. Uh, I did I did not even know Git, for example, before even joining to the group. And these days, like people come through winter of code and all that. People are very smart in general. And looking back 5 years from now, yeah, it was it was like I'm glad it happened. Like I'm glad the whole thing happened. Like the whole experience in MDG. I met a bunch of awesome people who are like leading their own startups, and they are doing PhDs and such. And there were a lot of chapos. I took a lot of chapos. I gave a lot of chapos. Uh, I was often in second year. I was often forced to give chapos back to back multiple times a week from my immediate juniors. But then I ensured that my like juniors 2 years younger than me would do the same thing to them for a payback. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. The only problem was that I could never manage to I could never manage people to converge and make a concrete plan for a trip. And I I think given what other groups SDS Labs does for a trip, Rishikesh, I thought I would also start. It would even inevitably just start a tradition of going to a fixed place every year in MDG, and I did not want that to happen. But I am glad that people finally made a plan and went to Shimla. But yeah, generally it was so much fun. When I started there, we did not have a room. So this, other than like just Android development, all this other affair of say managing a room for us and getting all these equipments and setting up MDG, like scaling it up and making it more famous. It was all a wonderful experience, I would say. And towards the end, paper reading group, I started it with a very personal motive, with a bunch of people. I mean, I have been open about it with most folks, and it kind of helped uh, to set a few things straight. That paper reading group will never be like other campus groups. Here, for like the seniors, especially me, I would always behave like I care about only myself and not about others. I would not care if people would not be motivated. I would simply just ask them to not come if they are not interested. But because of that, I think it created a sense of independence in juniors. And I'm happy what paper reading group or now visual and language group is doing. And I'm happy these discussions are going on, and juniors are getting publications in CVPR and ICCV, which I would not even dream of getting. So both of these groups, I think they have come a long way from when I joined or I started them. So yeah, I am generally very happy and proud and sometimes emotional.
Yeah. Thanks, Katie, for having with us. Like you
Yeah,
have motivated us all about and like solving mostly problems related to jobs versus research, and that's really great to have having you with us. Yeah. Thanks,
yeah.
Katie.
Thanks for having me. Yeah.
Thanks, Ashan.